And welcome back, everyone. It is the Catholic Convert Show. Finally, Thursday, May 30th, just one more day until we enter into the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It's one of my favorite months, especially because it's kind of, at least around here, we've definitely seen a trend of it overpowering the weirdo rainbow month. And the more we can do that, the better. I'm really enjoying the trend of seeing a lot of these billboards being erected all over the country. There's been one going up in New York City. There's been one going up. I saw one in Texas. There's one down the road from my house. June is for the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ, and it's a major shift from the random weird crap that we've seen over the last, I don't know, decade. They just was seeming to get progressively and progressively worse. And I don't know, maybe the Overton window slammed shut finally and people had enough. I don't know. But I am looking forward to June, mainly because the Feast of Corpus Christi is one of my favorite holy days. Um, my son is serving at the altar, and we've got a big old procession around the ginormous campus at our parish right after Mass, and then it funnels back inside the church for a final benediction right after. And I think it's perfect to be doing it right now. And obviously, it's not a coincidence that they planned the Eucharistic procession pilgrimage that's been going on nationwide uh, to flow right through the Sacred Heart of Christ month. So I'm digging that, and I'm mega excited. Ed, can you tell I took some of your Prozac this morning? I'm in a good mood too.
I was looking at the bottle, something didn't seem right, and and now we know. Now we know.
Uh, Jeff's been here. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know how the past couple of weeks we've talked about it specifically on a couple of the shows, but in one in particular, we really talked about the revival that we've been seeing and more young people coming into the church. Well, there has been one exception that has been noticed lately. There is an increased trend in young Gen Z women that have been more likely to disaffiliate from their religion. And it's not just Catholicism, but it's religion in general um, over the past few years. Now, for the past 20, the trend has always been, well, probably more than 20, but it's been that men have left religion at higher rates than women. But now, for the first time in those 2 decades, young men are more likely to stay with it. And young women are leaving, according to a recent study that was looked at. But for the past 3 generations, you've got the baby boomers, the Gen X, and the millennials. Uh, Men have always been the ones who have left religion more than women. But right now, they're somewhere between 46 and 54% of Gen Z women are turning away from their faith. And again, it's not just Catholicism, but the study went into uh, kind of a deep dive into the research, looking at the various influences as to why they may be leaving. And 54% of young women are pro choice, according to a general social survey that was conducted in 2022. And when it comes to the LGBTQ divide, 31% of Gen Z women identify as LGBTQ, compared with only 15% of Gen Z men. Now, what that means is young women in general are simply becoming more liberal and progressive. But we have this newer generation of Catholic priests coming in, and we touched on this a few weeks ago, are markedly more conservative. Now, there's some secular media studies like Associated Press. They are also observing the traditional renewal that we've been seeing, right? But the growing political liberalism among young women, and obviously the rising salience of abortion after the what was that, the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court, is largely responsible for it. Now, obviously, you had like 57, 60% of boomers who were leaving their religion, but only 40% were women. And then it was around the same numbers, 55 and 45 and 53 and 47 between Gen X and uh, millennials, respectively. And it's only with Gen Z that that pattern has been flipped over. Now, obviously, young women are more likely to identify as feminists, with about two-thirds of Gen Z women between the ages of 18 and 29 are saying they do not believe that men treat women and men equally. And millennial women also tend to agree with that, which is about 64 to 65% between the ages of 30 and 50. But here's the one thing that's starting to bring them back. So Gen Z has been known as the loneliest generation, and that was from a Pew survey that was done a couple of years ago. Americans who are affiliated with a religion are more likely to feel more close to others than non-religiously affiliated Americans by a wide margin, and I'm talking 73% to 51%. And so it's the apostolate of friendship and hospitality that is starting to bring more people into the church. Now, it's still currently showing that, it's more women leaving the faith than men. And when I hear that, I'm thinking it's probably the ones that grew up in a very religious household. And then when they became adults, they got jobs, they went to college, they had all these things. And now, obviously, not all of it is going to be attributed to, well, it's the feminist ideology or it's the LGBTQ. Sometimes it's just life. I know dozens of people that just stopped going to church because they had to work on Sundays with their job. It's not like it was, well, I don't believe in God anymore because I'm 18. No, it wasn't that. They had jobs, they had families, they got busy, and they're working themselves in these jobs 50, 60 hours a week. And then on Sunday, they get a day off. They're not going anywhere. Right. So I understand how that can fall into it. But one of the main goals of the church now is the theology of home. And it's to show, not just tell, what a true Christian anthropology of embodiment looked like. Now, the popular image that we've seen on Twitter, it's always filled with like these pop culture esque distortions. And what Catholics need to be doing is pushing back against that by putting out media that reflects our true nature. We've got this show. You and I've got this show. We've got several Catholic creators online that are putting out great content. But one of the things that needs to shift is a more of a showcasing of our lives. As much as we talk about the faith, as much as we talk about doctrine, as much as we dispute, whatever false claims that are made against the Catholic Church, or if we're talking about hot button issues, whatever, but more content that people can relate to that shows, again, not tells, the reality of what it's like in like a Catholic household. Because yes, there are plenty of Catholic households out there where both the husband and the wife work. There's nothing wrong with that when you have, hey, somebody's got to pay the bills. Now, my wife doesn't work, but I'm able to pay the bills and provide, a life for my wife and kids that, is comfortable. Now, there are those that stay home that are kind of put into this little box. Like, they're barefoot and pregnant all the time. I wish I could say my wife wasn't one of those, but 9 kids, maybe 10 coming. I don't know. So I can't really dispute that. But there's a lot of others out there who can, right? And I try to just write that off as that my wife finds me simply irresistible. And that's a true statement, by the way. I'm the manliest of all manly men. But
Of course.
these young people that are, especially on college campuses, they're being fed with these images of, women are less than, or the church is a misogynistic patriarchal uh oppression box that women are shoved into and they're not allowed to do anything, which is obviously not true, right? But one of the things that people can start doing, um, even if you can't get your friends to go to church, your young friends to go to church, if say you're 20-ish, right, and you've got people in your circle, men, women, whatever, and they've got these negative uh, assumptions and preconceptions of what it's like to be a woman who's Catholic or a man who's Catholic. The men are out there doing whatever they want and keeping the women down or whatever. You know, the easiest way to do that would be, if you don't want to start creating online, invite them to your house for dinner, get them to your table, get them over there for coffee, start hosting stuff at your house, because the apostolate of friendship and hospitality is a tremendous form of evangelization. You know, I became, quote unquote, more Catholic when I started hanging out with Catholic people. And the weirdest thing is that all the Catholic people that I hung out with, we never really talked about faith. We never talked about the Catholic Church. We talked about things that were going on in our lives. And it was that visual representation of the lives they were living, the life I was living, the lives everyone else was living, that went, oh, and it just kind of starts to chip away at all these, misconceptions that most people will have about what it's like to live as a Catholic. Yes, we are absolutely insane. Okay. I'm like, we've got like 700 rosaries in our house. I've got a holy water font by the front door, crucifixes absolutely everywhere. Ed has like death certificates and papal briefs and pieces of human remains in his basement,
I do. I do.
right? I'm not even exaggerating about that last one. He does. But we're insane, but that's only because our faith is an integral part of our lives. And but more so than that, we're living in a way, or we try to anyway, that our faith is reflected in the way we live. We're not Sunday Christians, right? We are Christians 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that might sound like it's off-putting, but I promise you, you walk into our house, you're not going to find us like, you know, I don't know, like a redneck tent revival down in Alabama somewhere. You're not going to find that in our houses. We just live, or try to live the way Christ told us to live. And in doing that, you can show that, yeah, they might be insane, but they're an okay kind of insane. Those crazy Catholics, as my parish priest likes to call them. It was what we assume everyone that lives across the street from our parish is always thinking whenever we're having like a Eucharistic procession or something that goes outside the church walls. They're like, ah, close the blinds. It's them again. Something like that. But that's why women are leaving, these young Gen Z women, is because this constant battering and smattering of political ideology, and it's painting a false picture of what it's like to live as a Catholic, if you're a man and if you're a woman. The more they're rejecting Christ's church, or even any religion at all for that matter, the lonelier and more disconnected they feel. And so it becomes this deeply perpetuating cycle. And they're just feeling lost. They're alone. They're angry. But again, a 25% increase in the amount of people that feel more connected, more part of something, and don't experience that empty loneliness that this generation is facing are people that are members of the church. Now, I'm not telling you to go to church because you're lonely, but it's a side effect because I have not felt lonely in a long time. And I've got dozens of friends. Like, I mean, I go to the mountains with like 30 of them at a time for 4 days at a time. And I would still feel lonely before coming into the church. Right. But that's how we have to get them back, you know. And hopefully we've got these strong young men that are coming into the church that are now more likely to stay and stick with the church with this more traditional revival of the faith. They can showcase in their own lives without being that annoying rad trad weirdo, you know. Women stay home, it's an abomination. That's one of the weird things that I disagree with. Like what's his name, Ripperger tries to talk about the celebrity exorcist. It's not an abomination for your wife to work outside the home. Calm down. You know, that guy's very extreme. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he disagreed with the priest. Yeah, it happens because they're people too. But what's it really like to live as a Catholic? If you've got friends that are not Catholic or not affiliated with the faith at all, and maybe they have this weird thing that, oh, they're going to beat me in the head with the Bible. No, just come to my house for coffee. You know, we'll cook some burgers, drink some margaritas, just come and relax. You'll see it's not what everyone tries to paint it as negatively, that the ideology that's being pimped out over the airwaves on every form of media is trying to portray. Now, unless you go to Ed's house, then he's got dead stuff in his basement.
Yeah, but my house is the outlier. Most Catholic homes are not like mine. We would have to say that, right?
Yeah.
You know what
But
bothers me
don't
about
you
all this
agree?
is
Don't you
that,
agree with like when people have these misconceptions about us and then they come to our house and they're like, "Oh, you're not weird."
oh yeah, of course. And I've had experiences like that, and um, I mean, hell, all you got to do is spend 5 minutes on Twitter, and you'll see some of the bizarre misconceptions people have about Catholics in particular. But and getting back to this whole idea of women in particular leaving the faith, I think it. I mean, it comes down to a basic truth, which is that they're being lied to. It starts now in middle school, and then in high school, and then it's especially in college, where they're told that they're being oppressed, they're being held back, uh, they're being use all these things that aren't really true, and then you know it becomes, well, who's oppressing you and who's holding you back? Well, it's men, and
Are they
what
in the room with us
organization
right
is it
now?
out there? They might be, but what organization is it that is run entirely by men? Because they must be the main culprit, and of course that comes down to the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church must be the headquarters of this misogyny and patriarchy and all these terms that have become you know uh, rallying cries for people. And but it's so funny when I think about it, because the only the only thing the church is doing is pointing out what man has known since the beginning of time, and that is that men and women are different, and we should celebrate those
You can't
differences,
say that.
right? Well, I know you can't, but which is so funny, but everyone's being told no. There's nothing different between man and a woman, and you can be whatever you want to be, and you can do whatever you want to do, and that's how we came up with terms like menstruating people and lactating people, instead of, you can't say woman anymore, you can't say mother anymore. It's so ridiculous to me. Anyone can accomplish anything regardless, and that's
Oh, yeah?
simply
Well,
not
then how
true.
come I'm not
There's
in the
nothing wrong.
NBA?
Well, that's because you're short. Let's be honest. But
Hey, Muggsy Bogues. I'm
you
taller
bring
than
up a good
Muggsy
point. But
Bogues.
here's the thing. Yeah, by what, 2 inches, I guess. But here's the thing: is that, and sports is a great example of this, because I don't know if we've ever talked about it. Back in the day, um, when, I believe it or not, there were sports when I was a kid. They had been invented, but I ran
Yeah,
track. I was a
the
hurdler,
Olympic
one other
Games
thing.
in Greece where you had to
And
wrestle naked, right?
exactly, well, I have done that,
It's the
um,
first Olympic
but
Games. Of course, there were sports back when I was a
yeah,
kid.
but back in high school, I was a hurdler. And I find this, when they started getting into this whole thing that, there's big issue now with men can be women, women can be men, blah blah blah. It's all one big jumbled mess. And I look at it, and I look back at the times. Now, granted, I was very good, but the times that I ran 45 years ago in the hurdles, 45 years ago, those times would be medal placing in today's women's Olympic hurdles. So to say that there are not differences between men and women is ludicrous. Sometimes those differences benefit men, sometimes those differences benefit women. And that's okay. Why are we not okay with that?
Imagine if they
Why does
worked
everybody have
together.
to have the
Oh,
same?
man, how would that be? How awesome would that be?
Right? And that's the whole thing. And it'll be really awesome. And what are you describing? You're describing a family, right? Which is another thing that people have issue with today. What is a family? What constitutes a family? And I don't get it. I
Well,
don't
then
know
you've
why
gotta add
there's
in
this
the,
whole
whole,
big pushback.
anti-natal sentiment
And
too.
well, yeah,
You can't have
it's
kids, it's bad
I
for
don't
the
know.
it's bad
It
for
it
the
just it
environment.
baffles me. Yeah,
But, I mean,
exactly.
I get it.
It just it floors me. I know. I mean, I there's something I often, I'll say this to people, and I'm sure that this will be seen as, I don't know, a man being a man being misogynistic, whatever. But I have often said, and I don't know if you've noticed this in your life, you've probably noticed it at least 9 times in your life, Jeff, that a woman who is expecting is 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 such a beautiful thing. There's something special about it. There's a glow in their eyes. There's a sparkle in their eyes. There's a rosiness in their cheeks. There's this aura of just joy about them that is unmistakable and unbelievable. And I'll never
Like,
experience that. You'll never experience that.
except from, like, 6 AM to about 10 AM when they're just
Well, okay.
dying of morning sickness.
Well, and
And
that's
then
temporary though.
probably around the 7th and from the 7th to 9th month when they've got ankles the size of a feminist's neck,
Oh my goodness.
it's that's when
Again, you can
it's,
send those emails to Jeff at CatholicConvert.com. Um, but what I'm saying is that okay, there might be things that you or I can accomplish or that we can do that. Listen, you and I are probably better at writing our names in the snow than most women are. Okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that,
I write
right?
mine in Roman
It
numerals.
we are. I don't think I need to see that, but what I'm just saying is that why do we have to bemoan the differences between men and women when we can celebrate the differences and be happy that there are differences? And whether we like it or not, God created us to be different. So it's not like we get a vote in this anyway. And so trying to override God and override his design, it just seems so ridiculous to me. It's part of what people are being told, that you know, you have that you should override God because God's a man and he's deciding how you live your life, and that's wrong. So I don't know.
Uh, I'll tell you
It's
something.
crazy.
When
It's
my
crazy.
youngest son, when my youngest son was born, my wife experienced a postpartum hemorrhage, right? And it was kind of unexpected. Um, Never had any issues with the other 8 births, right? Well, outside of the 2 miscarriages between. Um, but of course, I remember the day because I was there when he was born. But what I remember most is when I got to hold my son for the first time, handed right to my wife after he was born. They cut the cord, or I cut the cord, and then, hand him off to the nurses so they can go and get him weighed and cleaned up and checked out. My wife looks at me and she goes, "I'm starving. Can you go downstairs and get me a sub? I'm starving." Of course, babe, you worked hard. I got you. I go downstairs and I'm getting the sub, but I can't remember exactly what she wanted on it because she's one of those that has to have like 70 different vegetables on her sub sandwiches. I'm like, what was that 49th item that needed to go on there? And I'm calling her, but she's not answering. So I go, you know what? I'm going to wing it. This is Subway, right? So I'm like, going to get you a meatball sub, get you some protein, get you going again. You're good. I get upstairs and there's like 14 people in the room that weren't there before. And they're moving with this swift but urgent efficiency, right? And I'm like, what's going on? And my wife tells me, well, they said that I had a hemorrhage and I won't stop bleeding. But they were on the ball. It was like bam, 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 bam. They were hanging bags of blood. They were giving her some medication that would stop the hemorrhage. I know the name of it, but it slips my mind right now. I think like ergometrin or something like that. But uh, it's the whole time it's going on, I can tell she's scared. And my wife's Hispanic, and she was pretty pale, right? And she's like, I'm scared. And so I started lying to my wife. Right? I'm like, listen, I, I get it, but the whole time you were, talking to me, I don't know if you overheard what they said, but you're pretty much done now. All they're like, everything's fine and stopped. They're just topping you back off with the transfusion, the blood bags that they're hanging up. She's like, really? I said, yeah, you didn't hear it? Inside, I'm freaking out, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, if I lose my wife, it's going to be bad. And it's not because I mean, obviously, losing her would be absolutely devastating to me. But more so than that is that it would be devastating to my children, not just from losing their mom, but for inheriting me as a single father. And I say that because there is a 0% chance that I will ever be as good of a parent as my wife is. I will never be as good as a parent as my wife is. It's impossible for me. I don't think I'm a bad dad. I do my best to be a great dad. I love my kids. I hang out with my kids. I play with my kids. But there's something different when it comes to my wife being a mom. And that's not, and no man out there can ever emulate that. Right. And I've got a lot of experience with kids, 9 of them, but there's 0 chance that I would ever be as good of a parent as my wife because she is one of the most incredible mothers that any kid on earth would be lucky to have. And I'm just me. Right. And I'm not trying to be funny or put her on a pedestal. I'm being honest. My losing her, the prospect of losing her was horrifying. But when I added that to the possibility that my kids would get me as a single father, I knew that it would have been way worse. Now, obviously, everything was fine. I was only off telling her that, everything's fine now by like 30 seconds. Because 30 seconds later, everything was cool. And they just topped her back off, put the cap back on, you know, let her drive out from the gas station kind of thing. But it was probably one of the scariest times in my life. And I've done a lot of things that should probably scare me, right? But that was terrifying. And it's not to say that, dads can't be good parents, but it goes into what you're saying about there are things that women can do. There are there are things that men can do. There are things that both men and women can do. Both men and women can be parents. Men cannot be amazing mothers. Mothers cannot be amazing fathers. They are two entirely distinctive roles. And people get pissed off at me when I say that, especially when it comes to like Mother's Day, right? I got to remind y'all, Mother's Day is not for single fathers. I'm sorry, but then when Father's Day rolls around, listen, it's not single Mother's Day. You are not doing both jobs. You are doing your job on hard mode. That's what you're doing. Because single moms that are out there, whether their husband has left them, whether he's passed away, whether they never had a husband, their job is incredibly difficult, right? And any mom that's out there as a single mom and she's making sure the kids are fed, she's making sure they're clean, she's making sure they're, you know, getting everything done that any two household parent, you know, or two parent household uh situation would pull off. If she's doing that, then that woman is a friggin' hero. Okay. I will say that, and I don't care who that aggravates, but there's plenty out there that will get mad when I say Father's Day is not single Mother's Day. You're not doing the dad's job. You're doing your job on hard mode. You're doing your job on survival mode, right? It would be no different if I lost my wife that day. And I'm not doing the mom's job too. No, I'm not. I'm doing the dad's job, which is my job, but I'm doing it on the hardest possible mode there is because I'm missing that critical component to the other half of this family dynamic. And that's the same thing for single moms. They are missing a critical component because they cannot ever be good fathers. They can't be fathers at all, just like men can't be mothers at all. That is a good thing because if they could, then the entire point of a family unit would be unnecessary because we all have our individual roles to play. It's just like what we were talking about the other week when we've got, the women getting mad that they cannot be ordained. You still have a critical role to play in the running and upkeep of the church. If you abandon that because you want to do the man's job, then the church crumbles. If men abandon their critical role because they want to do the women's job, the church crumbles. It is a complementary, divine functioning relationship. And it's supposed to be that way. I don't understand why people won't just stop trying to do things that are not your job, because if your job doesn't get done, everything falls apart. There's no way I can be as good of a parent as my wife. Zero chance. And you know what? My wife would be struggling like crazy if I was gone because my kids would then be missing a father. both men and women
Yeah.
are critical with their individual roles, and both of them have to be fulfilled.
Yeah. And like you said, they're complementary. It's kind of like if you're putting together a basketball team, you don't put 5 guards on the court. You have a couple of guards, you have a forward, you have a center. If you have a football team, you're not putting 11 quarterbacks on the field. You know what I mean? And so to say that men and women are different, to say that their roles are by no means says that one's more important than the other. And I think that's that's part of the lie, though, that saying by Ed being a man and saying that men and women are different, he's saying that men are more important. I've never said that in my life. I never would say that because I know
Doesn't matter what to
that's
say
not the
online; they
truth.
take it how they want to.
Um, and and well, of course, but like you said, I mean, children without a mother are going to suffer. Children without a father are going to suffer, and I remember my childhood very well. I loved both of my parents dearly, but I went to dad with certain issues. I went to mom with other issues. It depended on what was going on in my life. Who did I need to speak to? Who was going to be more helpful in that situation? So even as I think we're born realizing that there is a difference between men and women. And as children, we realize there is a difference between mom and dad. There's a difference between what either one of those parents can do for us. And then you get into school and they try to beat that out of you and say, no, 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 no. There's no difference. There is no difference. And I think we do kids in school a massive disservice by trying to do that. And it is, in a sense, it does lead to the destruction of the family unit or of what it means to be a family unit. And I'm not saying that if you're missing a parent that you're a bad family. No, I'm just saying that it's preferential to have a full family unit: mom, dad, kids. Everyone has a role. Everyone plays a part, and the more of those parts that are filled, the better functioning that family is going to be. And as you mentioned, yeah, if mom is missing from the picture, if dad's missing from the picture, the other parent's going to step up. They're going to work twice as hard. But, and again, as you pointed out, but mom is never going to be dad. Dad is never going to be mom. It's just not going to happen. It's not possible to happen.
I don't understand why that's so difficult. I don't. Like, I
Nope.
want to go into a rant and, you know, listen, you know, it's almost, what did Chris Rock used to say? I just want to grab them and shake them, right?
Yeah, right.
But
Right.
anybody that tries to disparage one or the other, men or women, they're full of it. Like, we don't need men. Sure, you do. We don't need women. Are you insane? Believe me, I do not want to take on the role of childbirth. Thank you. I had a kidney stone earlier this year. Not doing that again. So, yeah, we're not switching it up and exacerbating the issue with childbirth. That kidney stone had me like dying. Okay, I'm not doing that. But no, it's the lies, it's the misconceptions, it's the way that the secular and anti-religious cultures out there try to portray the religious life. And I don't mean religious life like being a friggin' nun, you know, but loving God, worshiping God, living as God asked us to. Well, didn't even ask, he told us to. There's nothing oppressive about any of that. If anything, it grants you more freedom to live fully. But hey, what do
Again,
I know? I'm just a man.
but you are. But you know what? You bring up something there, and I don't even know if you realized it, but I think it's another example, something that really highlights what we're trying to say here. you're talking about women who are called to be sisters, to be nuns. I
Uh,
went to Catholic school, first grade through 12th grade. And my elementary school, so from first grade to eighth grade, I was taught by a sister. And I think it would have been different if there were men involved. What these sisters did, they for the younger students when I was in first, second, third grade, and sometimes you feel sick in class or something's just going wrong. The sister would take like a motherly role and they would be very comforting and very loving and very caring and take care of you like only some like a woman could in that situation. And looking back, I really appreciate that. When sometimes, I was going to go to the nurse's office because I had a tummy ache when I was 6 years old. I'm so happy that my teacher was a sister, and she had that nurturing component to her. And I think it would have been different if it were a man. So again, there's nothing wrong with following that path and becoming a sister. Nothing wrong with becoming a priest. They're different roles, but they're different on purpose, and they're different as ordained by God.
well, you heard the man. He was one of the first people that were out there building the wall around the Garden of Eden. So listen to him. But let's shift gears a little bit, Brad. Let's check out what Ed's dragging out of his basement today and look inside Ed's Vatican archive.
Oh, Jeff, today when I was down in the archives, I went into the archive library, which we do have down there, and I brought out a book for us. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Louis Bourdelot, but he was a Jesuit priest in France. He was born in 1632. He died in 1704. But he is very well known, and he's very well known for his sermons. He joined the Jesuits at the age of 15, and immediately others around him realized that he had such an incredible grasp on philosophy and theology, and they would actually have him step in when there was a priest who was supposed to give a sermon and was unavailable. They would have this guy, this young man, step in and give a sermon, and he very quickly became famous for his sermons, so much so that they had him spend his entire career as a Jesuit priest primarily giving sermons, and he became very famous even with the hierarchy of the day, the government in France. Louis XV was a big um, fan of his, and as he got older, he became very well known for his service to the poor. He was called upon very many times when someone was on their deathbed because he had a special way of dealing with people when they were close to death, especially people who were known as like persistent sinners. This priest, Louis Bourdelot, was excellent at getting them to confess their sins and to receive Christ in their last moments, and so that he sent them off to the next step there in a very good way. But he, like I said, he was very well known for his sermons, and there are a number of books that contain his sermons. And I brought up one of those. This little beauty here, very small little book, as you can see. This one here was published in 1750. So this is 275 years old. You can see it is in French. It says right there, the sermons of Father Louis Bourdelot. And the writing is incredibly tiny, but it's a beautiful leather bound book, almost 300 years old. It contains the sermons of this very well known Father Louis Bourdelot, and it's one of the prized treasures of the Vatican Archives library that we have.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think the oldest thing I have is maybe this desk, and it's I don't know, 90 maybe.
But it's got a great story, that desk.
It does have a really cool story. All right, now who did we have for the saint of the day today? Ah, yes, the one that everybody's heard of. It is Saint Joan of Arc. Now, what? Whenever I hear about Joan of Arc, I always remember um, the old movie Joan of Arc that kind of depicted her as crazy. But of course, I already said the Catholics were crazy, right? We are. Now, she was burned at the stake as a heretic after a very politically motivated trial. She was, born of a fairly well-to-do peasant couple in Domermy just south east of Paris. And she was only 12 when she experienced a vision and heard voices that she later identified as Saint Michael the Archangel, Catherine of Alexandria, and Margaret of Antioch. During the Hundred Years' War, Joan led French troops against the English and recaptured the cities of Orleans and Troyes. Now, this enabled Charles VII to be crowned as king in Reims in was it 1429. She was captured near Compiègne the following year, and then she was sold to the English and placed on trial for heresy and witchcraft. Obviously, the English at that point were going to do everything they could to stick it to anyone who was French because they didn't have the greatest of relationships after a 100 Years War. Um, but professors at the University of Paris supported Bishop Pierre Cochon of Beauvais, who was the judge at her trial. Cardinal Henry Beaufort of Winchester also participated in the questioning of Joan in prison, and in the end, she was condemned for wearing men's clothes. And the English resented France's military success, to which she contributed. So, on this day in 1431, she was burned at the stake in Rouen, and her ashes were scattered in the Seine River. A second church trial, 25 years later after the fact, nullified the earlier verdict, which was obviously reached under political pressure. Now, she was remembered by most people for her military exploits, and but she did have a great love for the sacraments, which strengthened her compassion toward the poor. Popular devotion to her was increased greatly in the 19th century France and later among French soldiers during the First World War. Theologian George Tavard writes that her life offers a perfect example of the conjunction of contemplation and action because her spiritual insight is that there should be a unity of heaven and earth. Now, like I said, the movie Joan of Arc always portrayed her as just insane, right? And that she was this crazy lady that was hearing voices and think she could fight like a man and all this other. But like most things, history gets written and edited just like a game of telephone. But again, our saint of the day is Saint Joan of Arc. But her story does remind me of the what is it? It's like their darling, the Protestant darling. Look at William Tyndale, the Catholics. They burned him at the stake for translating the Bible to English. Uh, no. One, there were already English translations of the Bible about 100 years before he even translated anything. Two, there were laws in place that required English citizens to purchase the English translated Bibles because people couldn't sell them, the ones because they were not cheap. So they had to enact laws that forced people to buy a Bible. 90 years later, William Tyndale comes along and he writes an English translation of the Bible. Well, guess what? That English translation sucked. And it also had about 2,000 heresies just in the Old Testament. And so the bishop said, "No, bro, absolutely not. We're not going to approve this." But he wanted it to be approved. He wanted his translation to be approved because, one, he didn't like church authority and he thought he could sneak in all these little small changes throughout the thing. Well, when he went and did it anyway after falling in with Martin Luther, guess what? It was not the Catholic Church that went after him. It was Henry VIII, the guy who hated Rome because the Pope would not let him get a divorce because he just wanted to trade her in for a newer model. He really wanted to get some of that Anne Boleyn, and the Pope said no. So I don't have to do what you say. I am the head of the Church of England, so we're the Anglicans. Da, da, da. Okay, fine. Well, it was Henry VIII and a secular court that went after William Tyndale. And then they gave him the charges of heresy. And then they turned him over to the Catholic Church and said, "Hey, he's your boy, but we got him." And then, of course, he was sentenced to death not long after that and executed by burning at the stake. But all these cool little details, like he didn't translate the Bible to English. He translated some of the Bible to English and then added a bunch of his own bull crap in there. And of course, if someone were to do that today, every Protestant would be jumping up and down. They removed this book. They changed this verse. They're trying to change exactly. And y'all would be wanting the same thing. But they did that with Joan of Arc, like we just heard. Very politically motivated. They didn't like the fact that she was a better fighter than most of the English that were out there. She had great military prowess as a strategist and leading the campaigns against the English. And so when she gets captured, of course, we're going to make an example out of her. Well, what are we going to do? We can't look like sore losers. Nah, she's a woman. Let's charge her with witchcraft. You know, right in the same period where we were having the Salem witch trials already over in the U.S., which, ironically, piece of history, no witches were burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. That all happened in London, or England, anyway. But yeah, she shouldn't have been wearing men's clothes, bro. You see what happens? That's why we need to be the rad trad hardcore Catholics.
Look at that. We got bonus information there with our saint of the day. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, we had bonus information. Yeah. Don't ask me how I've got all this information in my head. I don't know. My wife will be like, "Hey, did you hear about this thing?" And then I go on to like a 7-year tangent about the history of like the mechanical pen or something. I don't know. It just randomly comes up. But no, Saint Joan of Arc is our saint of the day. Really cool 300-year-old book coming out of the Vatican archives that Ed keeps in his basement. And I don't know how we're going to top it. Oh, wait. Yes, I do. Because tomorrow we've got Vince Martell coming on the show. Now, you guys don't know who Vince Martell is. You're not alone. You're probably just a millennial. But he is a legendary rock guitarist, one of the founding members of Vanilla Fudge. And if you haven't checked them out, you can check them out. Now, Vince has been on a ton of shows. Like he's been on Ed Sullivan, he's been on Jimmy Fallon, he was on Huckabee. Very talented, very interested. And I'll tell you what, the one thing that I'm going to enjoy the most about him is that if I close my eyes while he's on the show, it's going to be just like I'm talking to Joe Pesci because they sound the same.
You you weren't supposed to mention that part, but
It's all right. Anybody that's ever heard of him
but
and saw him on Jimmy Fallon, they know what he sounds like. I'm gonna have him read
Vinny's a great guy. I tell you,
all of Pesci's parts from like Goodfellas. What do I amuse you? Am I a clown?
bring it on. He'll do it. He'll do it. Vinny's a great guy. I'll tell you what, Jimi Hendrix told Vince that he was like the best guitarist he ever heard. So take that for what it's worth. And I think I
it's
mentioned
just
to
Jimi Hendrix saying it, right?
Jimi Hendrix. It's nothing. And he played with Hendrix. He played with Hendrix. I told you that when Led Zeppelin came and wanted to get a foothold in the United States because nobody here knew who they were, they begged Vanilla Fudge to let them open for them. And it's because of Vanilla Fudge that people in the United States even know who Led Zeppelin is. So
and of course,
Vinny's a good
Vinny
guy.
being a
Everyone's going to
great
enjoy
guy,
talking.
he was like, and Vinny being a great guy, he's like, of course those bums can open for us, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I don't. Now, if he saw what was going to happen after that and how popular they would become, he might have changed his mind. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
Well, he could always like track down Robert Plant's estate and demand compensation. You're here because of me.
Exactly. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do with my kids' success. I made you.
Yeah.
Oh, but all right. We could keep rolling and rolling and rolling, but nobody would listen because it's Thursday. You all poor people have stuff to do, and it doesn't include listening to us. So, quick
Exactly.
reminder, head over to the App Store or Google Play, download Holy Habits, the best Catholic habit tracker out there, and it's free. But we'll wrap it up. We'll see you all tomorrow with Vince Martell. Really looking forward to that show. And you guys go be good. Have a good one. Don't add to or take away from the human population unless it's the former and it's, on purpose. Right? There's your safety brief leading into Friday.
Excellent.
All right.
Have
All
a
right.
good one,
You guys
everybody.
have a good one.